הם בלבד נותרו לי, רק בהם בלבד, לא ינעץ המוות, סכינו החד. במפני הדרך, בערוב היום, יקיפוני חרש, ילבוני דום. ברית אמת היא לנו, קשר לא נפרד, רק אשר אבד לי, קנייני לעד.
Jerusalem is more than 3,000 years old, but its recent history took a dramatic turn sometimes in the 1840s. Europeans living in old walled Jerusalem chose to buy land and build houses outside the city walls on the path leading west from Damascus Gate. This path is to be called HANEVIIM Street, the Street of the Prophets. It is 1 mile long, and it tells the beautiful story of the New Jerusalem. By the end of the 1830s, Europe was interested in the Holy Land, and in 1869, a first monarch, Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria, came to visit Jerusalem. The path beginning at Damascus Gate has become a road, and both local Jerusalemites, visitors and newcomers, bought land along it. Compared to the crowded, overpopulated old city, HANEVIIM was a street of mansions, enclosed convents, and monumental buildings.
The street turned out to be a showcase for a lot of examples of structures from many styles: German, Romanesque, Italian, Baroque, local architecture, and everything is entwined one with each other to create what we call the Jerusalem style, which is very unique style. For them, it was an opportunity to show that they have conquered, or they have created a building in this place, which is more important than creating a building in any other place. Jerusalem is a city of stone. That's the most common material, and that time it was the only material available to construct anything. So each of these styles, even though it was a very unique style from its own country, had to be the Jerusalem stone. The street is not a long street, it's a mile long, but along this street we have a diversity of communities, diversity of buildings, and a diversity of styles. A lot of neighborhoods were established. We have the Habashian, which is the Ethiopian neighborhood. We have Jewish communities. We have Christian communities, and we have Muslim communities all along the street.
Strolling past these eclectic buildings, one cannot fail to marvel at the variety of styles and periods of the architecture depicted in this neighborhood. The German architect Konrad Schick came to Jerusalem in the mid-19th century and acquired a reputation as one of the city's great builders and archivists. He was also an avid archaeologist, missionary, and most famously, a maker of clocks and models. In 1880, Schick built Tabor House, one of Jerusalem's most beautiful buildings. The front gate with its turret looks like the entrance of a German fortress. The walls of the main building are thick, and the design is like that of many Arab houses, with a long central room leading into side rooms. Today, it is the home of the Swedish Theological Institute. The Ticho House was constructed in 1864 by a member of the wealthy Arab family Nashashibi. The Victorian-style house betrays its intriguing history with some of the most colorful personalities of that era in the land. In 1924, Dr. Abraham Albert Ticho, the legendary ophthalmologist, and his wife Anna Ticho, an artist, bought the house. In this house, Anna produced many of the distinctive drawings of the hills of Jerusalem and portraits of local people, for which she became well known in her own right. The Ticho House has become a museum under the management of the Israel Museum. Dr. Ticho worked tirelessly to save the eyesight of all who came to him. His patients included Emir Abdallah, who later became King of Jordan. When Dr. Ticho was stabbed and left for dead outside his eye clinic during the political unrest of 1929, thousands in Jerusalem's Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities prayed for the beloved doctor to recover. Dr. Ticho's clinic is known today as the Kokia House, after its owners Benjamin and Rosa Kokia lived there until 1849. The Kokia family rented the house to the Austrian government, and it became the Austrian consulate in Jerusalem and home to Austria's first consul to Jerusalem, Joseph Pisamano. Soon the house was known around Jerusalem as a place of prestige and pomp. The Austrians were the only international power dedicated to protecting the Jewish community in Jerusalem, and from the consulate in Kokia House, they kept strong ties with the Jewish leaders and the new congregations and families buying land along HANEVIIM Street. We have no way of knowing how the interior of the building looked back then, but a walk through the Austrian hospice today, which Count Pisamano built in the neighboring old city, can give us a glimpse of Vienna in the Austrian Empire, where we can even get an exclusively Viennese taste of Apfelstrudel, Wiener Schnitzel, Sachertorte, and the like. In the 1920s, the British government took over the building and made it the headquarters for the Secret Service. Under a shroud of secrecy, the British government conducted surveillance and kept files on Jewish and Arab subjects in the land. Behind these closed doors and windows were kept detailed and sensitive records of the Zionist organizations and their leaders. A sign on a pillar outside number 6 Harav Kook is all that remains today of the Solomon printing press. This historic press was established by Michael Cohen and Yoel Moshe Salomon, two of the original settlers who founded nearby Nachlat Shiv'ah neighborhood outside the walled city. In 1863, they published the first Hebrew newspaper in the land of Israel, the Lebanon. During the War of Independence in 1948, the daily newspaper Yediot Achronot was printed here. It was the only source of printed news in Hebrew for Jerusalemites under the Arab siege. From 1948 until 1967, the street was divided between Arabs on the eastern end of HANEVIIM Street and Jews on the west end, with a no-man's land between. Since 1967, the street flows seamlessly east to west, with varied communities using it as their main walking and driving way.
What began as the most elegant street in the city, if we look today, more than a quarter of the buildings slated for conservation in Jerusalem are actually in the Street of the Prophets. It became, by the 1960s and 70s, one of the most neglected streets because of inappropriate urban development in the city. The time when the city of Jerusalem wanted to widen the road and add additional lanes for traffic in the Street of the Prophets was the same time that the city began to develop its plans for a light rail. The decision made that the street would not be widened, the buildings on the southern side would not be destroyed, and the beautiful historic homes would be maintained for future generations.
Nebi Akasha Mosque was named after a nearby tomb of a 12th century prophet, a disciple of the Prophet Muhammad. An ancient Islamic tradition claims that Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad were all buried here. That was the reason for the decision to name the street Rehov HaNevi'im, Street of the Prophets. Many Christian communities sprang up in the neighborhood. There is the International Evangelical Church at number 55 HANEVIIM Street, St. Joseph of the Apparition Convent at 66, and the Swedish Theological Institute at 58. The magnificent Ethiopian church stands out in its beautiful design. The lion over its gate is the symbol of this community, which teaches that Ethiopian Christians descended from the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. Visitors had to remove their shoes before entering the church, surrounded by its shady garden. The church was built in 1893 by the Ethiopian Emperor Johannes I. Not only Muslims and Christians resided here. This neighborhood was also home to one of the famous rabbis of the 20th century in Jerusalem, Abraham Isaac Kook, who adopted Orthodox Judaism to Zionism. Rabbi Kook lived on a square compound that surrounds a courtyard, a common building style in 19th century Jerusalem. In 1898, the Zionist leader Theodor Herzl came to Jerusalem for the first time to meet with the German Emperor Wilhelm II. Herzl met the emperor in an empty lot at number 42 HANEVIIM Street, where Wilhelm and his entourage were quartered in a tent camp. On December 11 of 1917, 2 days after the British forces took over Jerusalem, General Allenby had lunch at the English Mission Hospital compound on number 82 HANEVIIM with Lawrence of Arabia and other French generals. Today it is the Prima Palace Hotel on number 2 Pine Street. During the First World War, the entire compound was the headquarters of the 60th British Infantry Division. In recent years, the hospital has been turned into the Anglican International School. HANEVIIM Street hosted a variety of hospitals and physician clinics. One of the visible landmarks is the Rothschild Hospital, located on the corner of HANEVIIM and Arav Kook. In 1888, it was the first Jewish hospital outside the Old City. Another hospital that carved its mark on the history of this street was Bikur Cholim Hospital on Strauss Street and HANEVIIM. The building was completed in 1925. The famous British painter William Holman Hunt, founder of the pre-Raphael art movement, relocated to HANEVIIM Street in the mid-1850s and set about building his house. Hunt admired the new neighborhood. In one step, I had found escape from the affectations of civilized life. Nature presented itself in its unsophisticated and simple grace, and life reappeared as in its earliest stages. The William Holman Hunt House was bought by Dr. Helena Kagan, the first pediatrician in Jerusalem, and one of the leading pioneers of professional medical care in the city. In 1925, Dr. Kagan rented the small white house in the backyard to the Russian-born poet Rachel, who suffered from tuberculosis. Rachel lived in the backyard house, where she wrote some of her saddest songs. After 1 year, she left, saying that she could not take the loneliness anymore. Eliezer Ben Yehuda, the father of modern Hebrew, lived nearby at number 11 Ethiopia Street. A famous Hebrew song describes him sitting there at night, inventing new words that will soon revive the old biblical Hebrew and make it a living language, the new lingua franca of the land. Today, a number of buildings around the neighborhood still house consulates of different countries, like the Italian consulate at number 12 Harav Kook Street, the Ethiopian consulate at 38 HANEVIIM Street, and the Pasha's Villa, which once housed the Ottoman governor of Jerusalem at number 61 of the same street. Next door to the present-day International Evangelical Church at 55 HANEVIIM, the German consulate once stood during the Nazi era, flying its infamous swastika flag, only to be blown up by Jewish activists shortly thereafter. For a time, the US consulate was also at the same street. The street tells many stories of great love. Some of the most famous love stories of their times took place in these houses. The unrequited love of the poet Rachel to her lovers. King Solomon's love to the Queen of Sheba. Anna and Dr. Ticho. and Itamar, the son of Eliezer ben Yehuda, to Leah Abushdid.
After the Crimean War, when European powers gained the right to acquire land in the Holy Land, and they all wanted land in Jerusalem, and the kind of massive architectural structures that they wanted to build, be it consulates, churches, hospitals, elegant, noble houses, couldn't fit into the old city. So this axis of European presence in Jerusalem coming out from the old city was absolutely essential, and it paved the way for the modern city. At the same time, the smaller Jewish neighborhoods were built, but none of them achieved the magnitude of architectural scope and grace that the European powers, because it was governments investing. And that's why we have all the beauty and diversity of architecture.
Those days are gone and seem very far away. But the shadows, the songs, and the stories of these people still haunt these buildings. Human society is ever evolving. Is modernization killing this neighborhood? Some things can never be killed, such as the memories of its bygone songs, stories, intrigues, and romances, nor the images of its princes, missionaries, pashas, diplomats, the pioneering dreams of its poets and painters. You may be a stranger to this neighborhood, but there is something in these people that is in you, in all of us.